who are going to speak to the draft annual plan and the proposal to increase rates on vacant central city land. So Bridget Williams, you'll have 20 minutes, generally 15 minutes for the first and 5 minutes for the second. And I can see out of the corner of my eye that you are joined by David. So I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is it okay if we take our masks off?
Yes, no, that's fine for presentation.
Perfect. Excellent. So tēnā koutou katoa. So firstly, we want to acknowledge all the effort staff and elected members have put into the annual plan and the changes made due to the feedback from the community, stakeholders and the external factors that have occurred due to COVID-19.
We recognise that there is a balance to achieve what needs to be done in our community while reducing the financial impacts on the ratepayers, all the ratepayers, who have also experienced the strains and challenges of COVID-19 and its ongoing impacts.
So the board has already presented a written submission. However, this verbal submission is in addition and speaks to some of the key points within our presentation. Oh, first of all, rate rises. So our board is concerned about the proposed rate rises. As you know, this is a point we consistently push, as it's our residents who get hit hardest. A lot of these residents are asset rich, cash poor, and have also been impacted by the effects of COVID-19 through business or otherwise. However, we appreciate that some increase is needed for council to deliver on its services and infrastructure. Therefore, we support a 3% rate increase. Obviously, the next question that follows is, how do we make up this difference? And it comes down to prioritising the capital program and getting the basics right. Understanding what that is comes back to listening to our community. So according to the results of the resident satisfaction feedback survey, there remains significant room for improvement on basic deliverables, including conditions of roads, which scored a 29% satisfied, and condition of footpaths, which scored 36% satisfied, and also stormwater drainage.
It's not that we drop projects forever. We simply recognise that these are unusual and uncertain times. So let's make sure that we're actioning the expectations of what residents want, and recognise they too are going through some tough financial anxieties from the impacts of COVID. So we should be delivering on the projects that that they count on us to be done correctly or done right.
So on the other side of the coin, pun not intended, is the operational costs. So we consistently get residents confused and frustrated when jobs or projects that are undertaken are not consistent, done correctly the first time, or when there's a missed opportunity to fix multiple issues while another is being done. So a great example would be having a tree removed that was not planted in the appropriate area from a while ago, and then waiting months later for the footpath to be fixed.
Moving on from rates, as you know, from our submission, we're not asking for additional money, but keeping consistent to the theme of basics. We have highlighted several streets and areas we would like to prioritise within the existing budget. They are as follows: the Graham's Road, Memorial Road intersection, or Memorial Ave intersection, specifically rating the installation of a right turn arrow.
Do you want to flick your page?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh,
yeah,
yep.
Thanks.
Okay. The Waimāero-Maidstone intersection, specifically in relation to the installation of a right turn arrow. Traffic issues in the area of Merivale, bordered by Rugby Street, Papanui Road, Carlton Mill Road and Rossall Street, and Brenchley Ave in relation to the stormwater issues causing flooding. Finally, we'd like to note that due to the Ministry of Education no longer planning to reinstate the shared path through Cobham Intermediate School, we now have $180,000 that can be saved in the current draft annual plan. This is because the funds that were going to be used for the lighting through this path are no longer required.
Again, we appreciate the work that has gone into the annual plan, and we know this is a balancing act. As board members, our duty is to act for the community and be that voice. We hope you consider these voices when finalising the annual plan. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. And if there's any time for questions, we'd be happy to answer the best we can.
Do you want to speak to the other issue as
Yep.
well?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
I mean,
Yeah.
unless you want us to leave 5 minutes at the end and...
Oh, I think we'll just go straight into the other one actually because it's quite
I
quick.
think so. And then they're both done.
Both done.
Yeah,
Sounds
thank
good.
you.
So as for the vacant land submission, so the board supports the proposal and we appreciate the incentive and we hope you've already reviewed our written submission. So today we just have some further comments. So I'll pass on to David for some of those.
So with regard, it's having the tool in the toolbox and the ability to increase rates on it should be used wisely and with discretion. Obviously, if you are a landowner, you can only get a return on a building when you have a tenant. In today's environment, finding a suitable tenant to take up a long-term tenancy in a building is somewhat problematic and scarce to find. So to try and further incumbent a landowner with additional rates is, in our view, not wise.
I want to just clarify that. It just felt like the two of you were slightly different.
Yes. So I guess from our written submission, we are supportive of the rates.
Correct.
However, we just want this to be treated case by case. And David was just highlighting that there's external factors already on landlords and those that own property, and to just be aware that with those external factors, it comes back to treating each situation case by case.
Well, but vacant land, you're not talking about a tenant in that regard. So you're
No,
talking
but
about future tenants.
yes, correct.
Yeah, okay, so and that's the challenge around, being able to raise finance once you've got property sold in advance off the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Jake.
Thanks for that. You talked about getting back to basics and having that high priority when it comes to roading and footpaths and storm water. Yep. Where does cycleways fit in terms of those priorities for your board?
So our board has long supported a return to cycling. However,
high priority.
It is money that cycling paths should not be over-engineered, and the figures and the ongoing monitoring of cycleways should be continuously reviewed to see if actually the spending is correct. We do not need sledgehammers opening walnuts, in which case there has been plenty of that discussion around this table.
Thank you. Jimmy Chen.
One question regarding list 4, you Command Board recognize and prioritize with the existing budget, whether your intention is bring forward to this coming year.
Sorry, what was that, Jimmy?
You particularly mentioned the 4 different intersections.
Oh, yes, yeah. So ideally, we would love it if those areas could be prioritised. So we're not here specifically asking. I mean, if there's money in the pot for those areas to be focused on, that would be great. We've been hearing a lot of our residents highlighting these as key areas. So our board is asking that where there will be improvements made to traffic or parking, we would love those areas to be focused on because they've got a lot of high, they are high priorities for us.
Okay, but if you bring forward to this coming year, probably they have rates the impact. Am I right?
So we're not asking them to be put forward. We're just asking that if there will be improvements made to the board, then we would like it if those be prioritised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all right.
I've got Yanni, Sam, and Sarah.
Thank you. I've just got 2 questions, and thank you for your submission and taking the time. In your submission on page 10 of our agenda, I think page 2 of yours, you talk about the issues with large trees planted too close to footpaths and underground infrastructure, but then in your priority areas, you don't mention any support for trees. I just wanted to know if your community board would support council putting in extra budget to enable more trees to be planted in local areas to address some of the challenges that you've raised.
We always love trees planted. This is the Garden City. Our view would be that when, for example, when a landowner removes a tree, that they have to at their own cost, which is currently my understanding of the bylaw. They have to replace 2 trees. So I don't see the council needing to have to spend extra money that we don't necessarily have to invest in more trees. Right. However, we need to be able to find the money in the existing budget.
I don't think that's right.
I think I was more concerned.
I'm getting advice from councillors
Yep.
at the same time as so I probably need to I mean I think that you're describing the council's policy on public land.
Yep.
But that doesn't apply.
Oh,
on
sorry,
private
was
land.
the question not direct? Oh, sorry, you're
so
talking about.
I'm just mindful that there's some roads, for example, where there's infrastructure services that mean that large mature trees cannot be replanted if they get sick, or there might be areas in your ward too where there's a lack of sort of suitable trees being planted in public roadside space. So one of the amendments that wasn't carried in the draft was to look at putting some additional budget on to enable tree pits to be put in public areas to enable mature trees to be planted. That would be more appropriate to currently. Yeah. So I was just referencing where your submission talks about the impact of large trees being planted too close to footpaths and underground infrastructure, and just wondering if you would support, some budget being made available to address those sorts of issues.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it'd have to be also like case by case as well, because one resident's tree is another person's nightmare. So and at the end of the day, we also want to be representing the residents and what they want as well. But I mean that's an interesting concept, because we also know of people that want the trees in certain areas where the trees were never supposed to be planted in those areas. So I guess the question would be would we be throwing good money after bad if we're sort of digging these trenches around trees when they shouldn't have been there in the first place? So, and I'm not a tree expert, so I don't think I can answer that.
No, sorry. This is
to answer your question,
to get the appropriate trees planted in streets where people want trees planted.
Our preference would be for the design for a treescape, or for in a streetscape for trees to be there. Okay. That would be our preference. Yep. However, we would want the cost for those to be worked into an existing budget, not an additional budget.
Taken.
We don't.
And just the final question for me was, as part of the LTP, you came and talked about community boards being given a certain quantum of capital to be able to do the priorities that you think are important. Given that we're doing our community strategy and we're going to have an implementation plan coming back, I was just keen on your board's view whether you'd still support, existing budgets, reprioritising a component that could go to your community board or all community boards for capital.
Look.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's about giving our community board the ability to know where to best choose and place where budget should go, because we've got our ear to the ground when it comes to what the community wants. So, I mean, that does make a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. I've got Sam, Sarah, and Melanie and Mike.
Cool. Thank you. And I mean, I guess it's great to have you in as the first deputation or presentation today, because you've offered up a saving, which is fantastic.
180,000.
180. Can you just talk us through that? Because my understanding was that it was going to be Ministry of Ed funded. I just think there's been a bit of media commentary around it, and I know government have been involved. Can you just run me through what happened so that the wider public can understand that, please?
Yeah, of course. So we had been we had wanted to have the path reinstated between the two schools, and this was something that the Ministry of Education were eager to help fund, and we were happy to come to the party, provided if the Ministry of Education could provide funding for that, for us to put funding for lighting to help light up the pathway, 180,000. But then what has since happened is to reinstate the path. It's obviously going to be quite different to where it was originally, and it's going to require a different to go a different area, and it wasn't what was originally it wouldn't be reinstating the exact space. So as a result, the community didn't want it as much, and also the costs were really high. And so the Ministry of Education said that this wouldn't be funded anymore. And as a result, it's going to be we're not going to be able to reinstate the path because of that. And so we're able to save money because the lighting is no longer needed because the path isn't going to be put in anymore.
And to just one other distant point, I think your point about miscommunication may be through an error in our Member of Parliament for the area, potentially having got it wrong.
That's what I was trying to clarify, because there's been some public discussion around council being on the hook for over $1 million for that path, but my understanding was that was never the case. And so what I'm trying to get to with, it's great you've brought a saving, but we're not the ones ending the project as such, because we never committed to funding the path.
That's correct. It was Member of Parliament Sarah Pallett who...
She was speaking on behalf of the community, and I am going to interject because it's not appropriate to, to put some blame on somebody who's not...
I'm not assuming blame if I'm allowed to finish.
I'll just simply say that I met with the Ministry of Education about this matter, so I can interject on this and say that what Sam has described is correct, but the desire line having moved, because it was a desire line,
that is correct,
having moved it to the perimeter of the site no longer meant that it was a desire line. So the community itself was accepting of that. I think where the miscommunication was that it didn't get reported back as a joint communication from the ministry and the council. So and we should have gone back with a joint
what I was trying to clarify though in a public setting was
we were never up for the cost of the path. We were only going to be up for the cost of the lighting.
But the public perception is that by us removing the 180 grand, we're the ones ending the project.
No, absolutely.
Well, that's what I'm trying to clarify. So I'm sorry if it's taking a bit of time.
And at the meeting with council staff, it was decided to look for an alternative route that would be lighted around the other side. So, but not on the Ministry of Education.
But it's just to make it clear that us offering that saving as a community board we're not the ones ending the project.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Sarah, Anne, Melanie, and Mike.
Thanks. Hey, listen, thanks for that. It's been really interesting to read. A couple of things. There's a big difference between the nearly 5 and 3%, sort of 2% on rates. So that would be around $200 million of capital expenditure just in the next year, or sort of around $10 million of operational. And yet the stuff that's in your submission asks for some additional and doesn't really identify anything apart from 180,000 of operational as savings. And I'm wondering where the scale of capital projects you would like to have deferred, which will still mean additional rates for future ratepayers. But I'm just wondering which of those projects you would like to have deferred.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we want to entrust the council to make the right decision, and they know where the basics should be. I guess if we're looking for like specific examples, like one of the things that comes to mind is I believe there's like 15 million that is being spent on certain roads in the CBD, and so it's just examples like that. It's not to say that we're looking to necessarily remove projects. We're just asking for the prioritisation to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb to really ask ourselves, is this a priority right now, when right now we're actually going through some really uncertain and challenging times, especially when the ratepayer themselves are also experiencing these hardships as well?
Absolutely. And just with the operational stuff, you wouldn't want us to cut services to those people who are struggling as well, so library yards and those kind of things. For those people who are asset rich and cash poor, they're also big users of our libraries and all of those kind of things, so you wouldn't want those basic core services cut?
I don't think there's enough information at the table to make that decision. Everything also in front of the council for a decision is around the reduction in waste and not paying if you cannot get your red or your green or yellow bin things. So that takes us down the line of a user pay system. So if we are, and I'm an advocate for a user pays. So if I use a service, therefore we are starting to walk down that path of actually, if you want to use the library, you've got to pay for it, as opposed to it being a common asset.
And would that be the same with car parking?
Well, car parking we already have to pay while we're on the street, or a personal provider on a car parking building.
Only about a fifth of the car parking is paid for in the CBD.
We're going to run out of time.
Sorry.
So sorry, I'll just Anne, Melanie, and Mike very quickly.
Morning. Hi, kia ora. Just thinking about intersection safety, and you've got a couple there. You'll be aware that there's a strict criteria where intersections are evaluated in terms of safety. But we are hearing a lot through our community boards that people are concerned about safety. There's a lot of intersections that are needing attention, we believe. Would you be supportive of some extra funding coming through to address the city-wide issues?
A contentious intersection in our ward has taken years to resolve, and through the mechanism of a cycleway, where it had been clearly indicated that there was a safety issue in that area, which has been championed by a councillor around this table. We support safety in all spectrums within the city, whether you're on a bicycle or in a car or a pedestrian.
I've got Melanie and Mike, but very quickly. Sorry, Celeste,
what I wanted
that's
to
too
know
late.
is detail about the Merivale traffic issues, because I was wondering what you actually wanted there.
Yes, I could definitely have a conversation with you about this. So there some range from specific, and then others range from small. So if we're looking at a specific example, there's Rustrack and Tonbridge. There's this area where it's getting bottleneck and it's really difficult for cars to be going in and out of the street, and there's this little concrete berm that isn't really doing much, and so we're wondering whether that can be taken out, and that could hopefully remove some of the congestion and the bottleneck that is happening. That's one specific example, but then we're also getting examples from residents that are frustrated with parking. Obviously, with there being more people living in the area, this is causing more cars to be parked on the road, so the streets are quite narrow. So we're really wanting, this is a priority for our board. This is actually going to be a board priority, specifically in that Merivale area, because there's just been we're getting far more residents coming to us raising traffic and safety issues, and like I said, some are specific and they might be able to be worked at if we can go in and remove a certain area like a concrete berm, but others might require a bit of staff and traffic intervention to actually see what can be done in the long term, so we can make sure that residents that the streets are fit for purpose.
Thank you. Mike?
No, it's fine.
Thank you. Look, just on that last one, and possibly with some of the other priorities, we'll get staff to provide some advice on those, but having that, the governance staff will have obviously heard you discuss those issues. I think that concrete bit is there to stop people turning right when there isn't a queue of traffic, so which is possibly a safety issue. But let's look at the issues there and just see where they are on the capital program and what we can do. So
that would be great. Thank you so
very much for your time.
Thank you.
And
best of luck in your deliberations.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. The next